So the next thing we're going to look at is raster design. Raster design allows us to work with imagery. Now we can work with imagery in AutoCAD now, but raster allows us to work with images that are geospatially referenced. If you've ever brought in an aerial photo and had to scale it and align it so that it fit with your geometry, we don't have to do that anymore. We can assign coordinate systems and have that have the imagery taken and aligned for us automatically. We can also edit the images. We can do raster to vector conversion, so we can create AutoCAD geometry from an image if we want to. Let me jump back over to Civil 3D here. Okay, in this drawing, I've just opened a file here. This one contains some road center lines. Okay, this drawing has a coordinate system assigned to it. If I go to the Settings tab, I can right-click on the file name here and go to Drawing Settings, and we can see the name of the coordinate system. It's a California state plane coordinate system. So this drawing knows where it is spatially. Let me come up here to the Raster Tools tab. This is where we'll find, when Raster Design's installed, it'll be a tab on in your Civil 3D. It also is in Map, and it'll also show up in AutoCAD. So this is where all the functionality for raster is. I'm going to insert an image. Let me click Insert. That'll take and load the application. And the image I'm going to bring in is a USGS map. The application that I exported this from allowed me to export this map with a world file. We can see that right here. It's just this world file is nothing more than a text-based. It's a file you could open in Notepad that has the scale and the coordinates of where this drawing would exist in real life. So when we export this from, when I exported this from a software application, I could say I want this exported at the California coordinate system that I'm using here. So let me grab that TIFF image and I'll click Open. And raster can take and reconcile the coordinate system on the image, match it to the coordinate system in the drawing, and you can see that this comes in spatially in the correct location. So it makes things easier if we're having to place aerial photography or USGS maps, ancillary background images. Now, once we have the image in the file, there's a couple other things. Let's look at some of the other things we can do. I'm going to open the crop menu here, and I'll choose rectangular region. I'm going to crop the photo. I'll just take and crop this section 5 here, so we can crop the image now, much like we can in AutoCAD. Similar process. The nice thing is any image edits that we make using raster, we can save out as a new image if we want to. In this case, I would like to trace these contours. If you've ever had to trace these things like this manually, that can be a very time-consuming process. So what I'd like to do is kind of isolate these contours on screen. I'll just come up here to Process Image, Palette Manager, and we can see a spectrum of all the pixel colors used in this image. I'm going to select the brown ones. Those represent my contours. And I'll say, you know what, change those pixel colors to black. I will then select those same pixels again. I'll right-click and say Invert Selection to get everybody else. And I'll say, you know what, change all of those to white. And I'll click OK. And what that'll do is isolate those contours as best as we can. So these are still anti-aliased. In order to have the software trace these automatically, I've got to make it all black, all white. So let me go back to Process Image, and I'll say Change Color Depth. We'll make this bitonal. I'm going to do one more thing. Under Cleanup, I'll invert the image. At this point, the image looks a lot like CAD geometry. In fact, if you wanted to, if I select this image and go to my Properties palette, I could pick a different layer here, and if it's bitonal and it's inverted, it'll actually take the color of the layer that it's sitting on. So that's one thing that you could do. To trace my contours, let me zoom in here. I'm going to be using a follower tool here under the Vectorize and Raster or Recognize Text. Let me just open this up for a second. There's a tool here called Contour Follower. That's what I'm going to use. Before I take and run that, I'm going to adjust just a couple settings. Let me open this up. This is the options like we have with AutoCAD. I'm going to go to VT Tools General, okay, Vector and Recognize. Let me click Vector Separation. This is where I can adjust, I can preload properties if I'm tracing contours. It knows that that's a popular thing to do. Let me change my interval to 20. So minor contours are 20 feet, major contours are 100. I can then pick the layer. If it's going to trace it, you know what, put the minor ones on my layer that I called minor. Put the major ones on the layer that I created called major. And it's going to make these as polylines. I'm going to set their width right now to 10. We can always change it later, but this way they'll show up nicely on screen. I'll click OK and OK. Now we can go through and trace. I'll come down here to Contour Follower, and I will, let me select a contour. This one is going to be 940 elevation. You can see it traced it there. Let me hit Enter. And it's got a default elevation of 20. Let me just make that 940, and I'll press Enter. I'm still in the command. I can click the next contour. And you can see if it gets confused, it'll stop and say, what do you want me to do here? If we come down to the command line, I can say, back up. Each time I click back up, it's going to back up one segment. Or I can say roll back and roll this guy back to a previous vertex. And then I can manually get it started again and click continue. I'll press Enter when finished. Let's click another one here. Oh, I apologize. That was 960. Let me specify another contour here. Okay, so very quickly we can take and trace the contours, and what we're left with is polylines. These polylines are drawn to an elevation, so we can take and if we had to, we could make a civil 3D surface from these. Let me touch on one more thing. I'm going to go to Insert, and we'll bring in another image here. It's basically the same USGS map, just uncropped. So it drops in the right location. I just want to show you some of the optical character recognition we can do. I'll come up here and click the OCR tool, and I'll grab my image. And I'd like to extract this column of text here. All I have to do is create a rectangle that follows that angle. And RasterDesign will recognize that text. It'll highlight anything that it thinks is misspelled, so I can have the ability to change it. And when I'm finished, I can click OK. And I lost my symbol. Hold on. There we go. When I'm finished, I can click OK, and what it does is it converts this into editable multi-line text. Okay, so just some of the stuff we can do with RasterDesign. Now that I close this, it's asking me if I want to save my image edits back to the original images. I'm not going to do that.